Supposedly, these are must-reads in school, but I never read them. Hey Book Dragons, welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you could be here. Today we're talking about 12 books that are on most school curriculums that I never had to read. Make sure you like, subscribe, join my Discord, join my Patreon if you'd like to support me there. That'd be cool. The first one on the list is Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is an allegory written from the perspective of animals, but it talks about deeper truths about society and culture and government, politics, things like that. And I never had to read it, although it seems to be a staple of most school curriculums. I still have not read it to this day, and I think I eventually will. I do want to read it, so that may be one that I pick up later on down the road because I am curious about it. Another book on this list is The Great Gatsby. I haven't seen the movie that came out a few years ago, and I haven't read the book, and I know very little about it. My son had to read it in school, and he told me, "Dad, you're not really missing much," so I don't know if I'll read it or not, but it's been one that I've heard a lot of people say that you really need to read. I've never read anything by F. Scott Fitzgerald, so let me know in the comments if you think it's a book that's worth putting on my list to read, and who knows, I may pick it up one of these days. The next book on my list that I never had to read in school was Fahrenheit 451, and that's a real bummer. I'm actually really disappointed that I did not have to read it in school because I think it's a foundational book to read. I have read the book, and I absolutely loved it, and I really wish I had been required to read it in school, or at least it would have been optional, something that teachers encouraged us to pick up or maybe talked about it, because a lot of the themes that are in that book, the importance of learning, the importance of knowledge, the importance of learning different perspectives on things, I think is really, really important to be a well-rounded human being. At least I read it as an adult, and I'm okay with that. The next book on this list is The Lord of the Flies. It seems to be pretty much a staple of most school curriculums. I know my daughter had to read it for school. My son probably did too. And I never had to. And I've heard a lot of people talk about how good it is. And I don't know. The premise doesn't really strike me. So I'm glad that I didn't have to read it. Maybe I would enjoy it. But I really don't have a desire to pick it up now. I don't know a whole lot about it. Although I do know that it's kind of about a boy who ends up living in the wilderness and amassing a group of followers. I know that's a really simple description of it. And I did read the blurb a while back when my daughter had to read it for school. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really sound interesting to me. And I don't remember much about it. So if you think I should read it, though, let me know. I might pick it up at some point, but it's doubtful. The next book on this list is a classic of ancient literature, and that is The Odyssey by Homer, one of the great epic stories of proto-fantasy, really, and I've just never read it. I think I want to at some point. It seems to be required reading in a lot of school curriculums, and I never had to read it myself. But at some point I want to pick it up. And the same goes for the Iliad. I'm not as interested in that one. I'll probably check out the Iliad at some point as well. The next book on this list is Great Expectations. I honestly don't know a whole lot about this book. I know it's by Charles Dickens. I know it's a classic Dickens novel, but I don't know a whole lot about it other than that. So I thought I might just pull up the description on Amazon and see if it sounds like something I want to read. And if you've never read it too, maybe this will change your mind as well. Through a series of unexpected events, an orphan boy named Pip embarks on a journey of self-discovery and maturity. Along the way, he meets a variety of colorful characters and learns valuable life lessons. Great Expectations is an uplifting story of hope, perseverance, and the power of redemption. That's cool. I don't know if it's really my cup of tea, though, but I might give it a shot at some point. But yeah, I was never required to read it in school, although it seems like it does make the list for common required reading for schools. I do want to read more Dickens. I read A Christmas Carol for the first time last year, and I read A Tale of Two Cities back in college, which was not great, but I do want to try more Dickens. The next book on this list is The Giver by Lois Lowry. I read this book as an adult. I never had to read it for school, but from what I hear, it is required reading in most school curriculums. I liked the book okay, although I did not care for the ending. It just didn't land for me for some reason. I enjoyed the movie a whole lot more, and I don't know. It just didn't click with me. And maybe I would have liked it more if that had been the first dystopian novel I'd ever read, but I had read the Hunger Games series and the Divergent series several years before I picked up The Giver, and so I picked up The Giver and I'm like, this is kind of lackluster. I know that's an unpopular opinion because everybody seems to love The Giver, but I just didn't really care for it, so who knows, maybe I should reread it at some point and see if I change my mind, but another book on this list is The Scarlet Letter. I know the basic premise of the story. I know it involves people who commit adultery having to wear a symbol around their neck that shows that they were an adulterer and things like that. It was back in the Puritan days. So I kind of know the gist of it, but I've never read it. It does seem to be a very controversial book, so I don't know how many school curriculums actually do require this. I know it's been on some banned book lists, but some of the lists I looked up did have The Scarlet Letter on there as far as school curriculums. So I'm like, okay. My grandmother had an original first edition of the book in her library, and then it went missing after she died. We had a bunch of people in the house helping us to organize her stuff, and it turned up missing. Somebody probably wanted it for themselves and took it, and it's unfortunate, but I don't really have a desire to read this book, to be perfectly honest. But if there's some of you out there that really think it's a foundational book to read and you think I should read it, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Another book by George Orwell is on this list, and that is 1984. Big Brother controlling pretty much every facet of people's lives, especially reproduction and sexual pleasure. And I've seen the movie adaptation of it, which was an okay movie. But I never read the book. I never had to read it for school, but I know it is on certain school curriculums. So I'm kind of surprised I never had to read it. I've talked to so many people that have told me, Chaz, I'm surprised you've never read 1984 and you've never read Animal Farm. Yep. I never had to read it, so I didn't. Another book on this list is Moby Dick. And of course, this is a classic. A lot of people love Moby Dick. A lot of people don't love Moby Dick as well, though. It's not universally loved, and it doesn't really sound like it's something that would interest me. The basic premise is Captain Ahab and his crew are set out for the ends of the earth to track down this great white beast of the ocean that he's been warring with psychologically and emotionally for years upon years. And supposedly it's a metaphor for a man's war with God. It doesn't really sound that interesting to me, to be honest. So, unpopular opinion? Maybe? Yeah? I don't know. And the final book on this list is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. I have read this book as an adult. I was not required to read it in school, but I know for a fact that it's on most school curriculums because both of my kids had to read it twice, I think. Once in junior high and once in high school, I think it was. And so I know it is required reading. And I'm kind of disappointed that it wasn't required reading, but I enjoyed the book. It was fine. I don't know as I'd reread it, although I think I've read it twice actually. But I don't think I would reread it again, and I really have no desire to continue the rest of the Ender series. I thought the movie was better. I know. Don't shoot me. Unpopular opinion there, maybe, but yeah, I thought the movie was a lot better and made the material a lot more interesting. And so that completes my list of books that are normally required in school curriculums that Chaz never had to read. And maybe I was a deprived child because I never had to read these books. For some of them, I would agree with that statement. And for others, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I was missing out on much. Let me know in the comments what you think of my list of books. What are some books, either on this list or other books that are typically required in school, that you have not read? Or have you read all of them? Were you required to read all the books in school? Let me know that too. Until next time, guys, make sure you read more books, and I will talk with you soon.